Okay, I would like to invite our next moderator, Advocate Daria Tsafrir Haskin, to a conversation about how AI ethics can enhance cybersecurity, a panel with no cliches.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our panel on AI ethics and cybersecurity. A small apology, my co-moderator Cedric is on his way from another. Oh, here he is. Welcome, Cedric. My name is Daria Tsafrir Haskin, as you heard. I'm from the Israeli National Cyber Directorate. I'm a legal counsel dealing with cloud computing, emerging technologies, and international law.
Sorry about the delay. My name is Cedric Sabbah. I'm with the Office of the Deputy Attorney General for International Law, and I am Director for Emerging Technologies in that office. Basically, I work in international forums, try to promote Israel's interests in the development of international law as it intersects with technology.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Naama Ben-Zvi. I'm the head of the Biometric Applications and Identity Unit within the INCD, and also the Biometrics Commissioner of Israel, which means that we are performing regulation within the Israeli government when it comes to national biometric projects or identity processes.
Good morning. My name is Alžběta Solarczyk, Krausová. I am a head of the Center for Innovation and Cyberlaw Research at the Institute of State and Law, Czech Academy of Sciences. I've been a very long time in the AI regulation, and I'm also a founder and CEO of a company called Respectful AI.
Hey everybody, my name is Rony. I am from a company called Bright Data. We are a data collection platform, and we serve multiple industries, including AI. And I'm here representing all of the for-profit industry in general. And we'll talk a little bit about it later.
Hi, good morning. My name is Oleg Brodt. I'm the head of R&D and innovation for cybersecurity labs at Ben-Gurion University. As a representative of the academia, I'll try to be as boring as I can. Thank you.
Okay, so in preparation for this panel, we started off with a very vague concept of AI ethics. Over the last few years, this topic has become very popular, but unfortunately, it is interpreted to cover many things such as privacy, transparency, discrimination, and so on. The title of our panel is Can AI Ethics Enhance Cybersecurity? A panel with no cliches, and we mean it. So we would like to move away from the standard policy prescriptions about having quality data to minimize bias and try to have an eclectic and honest discussion about what AI ethics is. Can it indeed contribute to cybersecurity? And we hope that our panelists will tell us what they think. We'll start with a working definition of ethics. So let's assume for the purpose of this discussion that ethics covers all those concepts of morality that are not regulated. So for example, if we already have a duty within the law to protect privacy, then for this discussion, this is outside the realm of ethics. We might adjust this working definition ethics in the scope of our discussion. And to our panelists and audience, feel free to not accept this definition.
Okay, I wish we could make it like a drinking game where if anybody says a cliche, we all take a shot, but
everybody wins.
But the connection between AI, I think it seems to me, but again, I'm hoping to have a conversation and to be maybe proven wrong. It seems to me that at first glance, the connection between AI ethics and cybersecurity, it's like two different things. When we think about it, you talk about a person who describes themselves as an AI ethicist, I think there's too many people with that label right now, but let's assume they know what they're talking about. They're going to say, okay, AI ethics is about protecting people from automated decisions, from the bad decisions by computers. I'm oversimplifying. And cybersecurity is basically about between computers. We just want to secure a network, basically. And so you could think these are two completely different topics. Maybe there's no connection. But then I thought maybe on the other hand, ultimately AI ethics and cybersecurity kind of want the same thing, which is to protect humans from harmful code. And so maybe there's an overlap. So our panelists here, I hope they can tease out unexpected connections between these two topics. So that's their challenge. And you can decide after if they rose to that challenge. I'm sure they will. These are really amazing people.
So to kick off, we will start with presentations of each one of our panelists. They will have about 10 minutes to share their thoughts and insights on the topic. Rony, would you like to begin?
So I'm VP of Compliance and Ethics at Bright Data. And just to give you a high-level view of Bright Data and how we connect to this, and then dive into the non-cliché part. So basically, we serve all industries when it comes to data collection. It can be from e-commerce to travel to cybersecurity and obviously AI. And just to put it in the magnitude of data, when we're talking about data for AI in general, in 2023, Bright Data had traffic going through us, serving all those industries, more than 30,000 times the amount of data that needed in order to train ChatGPT. So that's a huge amount of data, and it's all publicly available data, and we strive ourselves to go and make sure that public available data remains at the public, as my t-shirt says. And it's not an easy fight because talking about cyber and AI, those two might not be on the same side. And I think this is the first part that I would like to address in terms of the cliches. There's a lot of hypocrisy when it comes to cyber, AI, and data in general, because we see from the inside how a lot of cyber personnel, cyber security companies who are fighting to prevent any data collection, bots, scraping, and those kind of things, actually do the same for themselves in order to train either their tools, their AIs, and so on. So, and that's the same thing across all industries. So all industries, no one wants to get a bot coming to their website, scraping their information, but they all, with no exceptions, all are using data. We all use data and data scraping. Either we do it ourselves as a company, we buy third-party data set, or us as users, customers, everyone who came here from abroad and needed to find the right flight at a great price, the hotel, or anything like that, all are based on data collection. On the other hand, we have cybersecurity companies, CISOs, and others whose main goal is to prevent that data scraping. But what we've seen throughout the years is a shift where cybersecurity companies and their AI models really understanding the essence of using a platform like ours to really go and train their models, to improve it, and then to work together with data collection practices, with the different issues we have in place to enhance. And I think we are at a very strange point in time in terms of AI, where everybody's talking about AI regulation, and we have those kind of conferences, and we have different policymakers talking about these as well. But we are looking at it just because there's a lot of fear about how it can be bad or misused or anything like that. We also need to understand, both from cybersecurity point of view, but also in general, that if there's no access to public data, all AI models will be bad. They will be biased because we are, as human, are biased. There's no one opinion here, even among this table. And that's why it's important for cybersecurity companies, for policymakers, for all of the industries to really work together to make sure we are using it at the right place at the right time. And yes, there can be mistakes and errors, but like Einstein said in the past, if you haven't made any mistake, you didn't try anything new. So this is part of our responsibility also to go ahead and make sure that's the place. And I apologize for the Einstein quote. I hope it's not a cliche. Yeah, I saw your look, that's why, yeah. So I'll be happy to hear the other panel members' opinion on that.
So I would say that in the biometrics world, the conflict that you describe is very much alive. I mean, between the need that the AI models, and I especially mean the facial recognition systems, would make less mistakes. And even though that technology grew much more accurate in the past decade, in some scenarios it's still challenging. And with no accessibility to data, you cannot train those. And then you hear the rightfully claims about bias. So this is a conflict that we're well aware of, and it is a problem. It's a problem. You have to find the sweet spot around that. I would like to touch base on something a bit different. I don't know if any of you were on our FraudCon yesterday. Anyone? Wonderful. I can repeat everything I said yesterday without you knowing. So we had a panel yesterday about deep fakes. So we see deep fake as an event that, or I see in my role as an event around identity, first and foremost. It's a crisis around identity. If you'd ask me a decade ago, who is this person? The answer would be much easier than it is today. If you would have come yesterday, you would seen some of our best work around deepfake generative images, and the abilities just grow much better. So, but around the identity management, it's a cat and mouse game, okay? Because it is very obvious that you have to claim your identity claim should be sincere. If you're a fraudster, then you'd have to be caught in some way. So I wouldn't go into the methods of doing so. I just want to switch over to the social media and the social media conflict around deep fakes and the methods to monitor deep fake. And this is the ethical issue that I see here. So in social media, we have principles like anonymity. We have principles like freedom of speech. And what constitutes deep fake for me, or something that is malicious for another person, it's his right to express his freedom of speech. And it's very hard, as far as I can tell, to draw the line. So from the one hand, the tools to generate deep fakes are getting much better and much accessible to the public. And on the other hand, the ability to cope with that is being undermined or being very complicated due to that conflict between values. So, and I'm sure everybody knows that basically social media is about profit. I mean, we are the product, so to speak. So the motivation is basically traffic and money, as we all know. So what is the motivation to scrutinize uploaded material to the web that is deep fake and actually changes our point of view in a way that is not really, it's not real, right? So this is a conflict that I see that is basically, I think the root of the issue here is a conflict of interest, not only the profit question, but a conflict of interest around what you should regulate and what not. Technology is also an issue, but this is basically an ethical question. And I think that we haven't addressed it yet, not policy-wise, definitely not from a regulator point of view. And we should all remember that regulating the big tech is an issue of its, is a big issue that is very hard to get anywhere around that. It's not so easy. So this is the challenge I'm putting into here, and maybe we'll talk further more afterwards.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk to you about cybersecurity and AI and ethics. And actually, when I learned about how this panel will be angled, I was so excited because I think it's one of the world's first panel that is actually connecting those topics. And in my recent lectures and academic debates, I'm meeting companies who are saying, yes, AI ethics is a wonderful topic, but is it a must-have? Do we really have to consider it? We already have so much regulation coming up our way, and AI ethics is nice, and especially when it comes to cybersecurity, what does it have to do with it? We need to have quick operationalized cybersecurity. We need to focus on the solution, and we need to collect data and somehow process them. When it comes to AI ethics, it's actually all about what's wrong and what's correct. And with the EU AI regulation, we actually had first all these assessments because AI is putting us into completely new situations. So when it comes to AI and cybersecurity, there are new questions what we are going to do with the data. So the first question is, are we, for instance, going to make personalized penetration tests on our employee? If we are a cybersecurity or any company who is doing cybersecurity tests, should we actually tailor our internal tests to each and every employee and find their vulnerabilities and then actually adapt our internal policies? Or should we deal with everybody in the same way? How do we process that kind of data? Are we going to do some kind of alternative predictive policing and social scoring of the employees? If we know that this person is reckless, are we going to give them less access? Are we going to treat him the same or her the same? Or are we going to put specific measures in place? And there is a number of questions, and actually, AI ethics here might sound as something. I'm sorry, the microphone is kind of not working properly. So the question is, how do we deal with those issues? And if we are not dealing with them, are there any consequences for our company if we don't implement that? Imagine what could happen if you are doing that. You are doing personalized tests. Can you hear me even if I speak without microphone? Okay, this one is better. So what are the consequences if I'm not actually doing that? The first one is you can erode the trust of your employees. If they will know that you are actually not dealing with them ethically, if you are suspicious for them, they might even turn. There is a lot of psychology coming with these ethical issues. So they might even turn against the company, and they might on purpose actually do something that would be harmful to the company. That's the first thing. Second thing, if we are dealing with clients as a company and we are, for instance, putting certain cybersecurity measures in place, like AI monitoring, blocking emails, etc., it can also erode the trust of the clients of the company who will actually want to stop communicating with the firm and maybe find somebody who has a better approach to them. And the third one, if a company is actually not implementing certain ethical approaches and actually adopting the principles of AI ethics, such as transparency and explainability, then the practical issue is that they might not be able to monitor well their cybersecurity, like smart cybersecurity processes. Because if those processes might be discriminatory, if they are not explainable, we might be suspecting the wrong people. That's why those principles are very important internally for the company. And yes, we might say transparency is bad for cybersecurity. We might want to limit the information. We don't want people to know, not to become vulnerable. But this, it depends on the implementation. If we are taking all those principles and implement them and create, for instance, a document that only few people will have access to, then everything is okay. Because just the auditability of certain practices actually provides higher trust, provides guarantees. And if some external office, for instance, in the Czech Republic, it would be Data Protection Office, would come and explore those practices, there is much more certainty. So I think it's obvious that even adopting AI ethical principles in cybersecurity has its meaning, because it can really, and I don't want to say this, it might be cliché, but it does build a trust. It really does. And it's very important to repeat it, because I see that people are not putting too much value to the trust because they cannot quantify it. So let me just make one academic last note, and that is there are already papers on AI ethics showing how you can measure the trust, how you can do the questionnaires among your employees, among your clients, and actually this is the good practice to do, just to see how actually these approaches influence your relationships internally and externally. And that's all from me.
Thank you. So a few comments before I go into my own notes, a few comments about some of the things that you mentioned before. So Naama, I feel that the social media is really the next frontier in deepfakes. And you know, in the last decade, I already have the feeling that it's not real people posing those arguments on the social media. But in the next couple of years, it's going to be intensified. And I wonder when we are going to get to the day where most of the content is actually being generated by those kinds of tools, by AI, and the bots arguing with bots. So this is the future we're heading to, and I'm not sure if ethics is the right platform to solve that, but it's definitely a question. And Ronnie, to your comment about scraping, and I'll touch on that later on. So I do think that scraping has a major role in data collection. So when developing AI-based systems, there is a pipeline of data collection and the pre-processing of the data and training the models and then testing them and inference production, all of that. But everything starts with data. And there are a lot of examples. We know today that not only those models that have more data to train on, their performance is better. There's a lot of research actually. If you have two different models, one is relatively weak, the other is relatively strong, and you feed the weak one with a lot of data, it's going to be much more efficient than the weak model. So more data, better results, better predictions, and it's very important. Another item to touch on, specifically for scraping, there are a lot of use cases for social benefit, where you scrape data. For example, there are projects in MIT where they scrape prices all over the globe from shopping sites. Actually, they derived the right inflation rate in Chile just based on the prices that are published in the websites in Chile, while the government wanted to hide the actual inflation rate. So there are tremendous social implications to that practice, and ethics obviously a huge part of that. So back to what I wanted to tell you today. So just to put this panel in a broader context. So I think that if we had this panel 20 years ago, then the title would be Ethics of Search Engines, because it was a new technology and it was really scary. And it replaced books and many other things we went to find the knowledge. And if we would have this panel 100 years ago, then the title would be The Ethics of Cars, because cars replaced horses back then. So every time we have this new technology, now it's AI. So we must have a panel on AI ethics, which has obviously its merits, but I think that we understood car ethics, so to speak, or car regulation over, seat belts. They were introduced 70 years after cars came out. So it took us time to understand the technology. And for search engines revolution, it took some time to understand, and I think we don't yet understand all the implications. All the big privacy debates that are just starting in the last several years are already a bit late. but only now regulators and ethics professionals, they understand the technology. And this is the same situation now for machine learning and generative models and LLMs and all those buzzwords. And I think that at the current stage, it's really difficult to tell what kind of regulation and ethics should we apply, because in 1 year from now, it's going to look ridiculous. So we really don't know where it's going to end. So what we can do is to talk about different principles and how they could be applied regardless of a specific reincarnation of a specific technology. So I'll propose some of those, and I want to start with 3 short stories about technology. You're probably familiar with some of those. So the first story I would like to discuss, are there any guests from the UK, from Britain? Hi, so you're familiar with the post office scandal that you had a couple of years ago? So please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not from there, I only read it. So in essence, in the UK, you have a lot of post offices, and most of them are actually being franchised, right? So roughly out of 11,000 post offices, you have 9,000 being run by, not by employees of the post office, but actually by people who get a franchise, and we call those postmasters, right? Thank you. For years, those branches have been run managed actually by software developed by a Japanese company for the UK post office. And according to this software, most of those postmasters had deficiencies in cash. So from time to time, many times actually, it was apparent from that software, from management software, accounting software, that those postmasters are actually stealing money. And the numbers, actually, I checked the numbers this morning, but I think roughly 900 people were prosecuted by the post office, right? Lost jobs, homes, criminal charges, because they stole, because software said so. And it was not machine learning, it was not AI, it was technology from 30 years ago. We didn't have anything there. So taking this discussion to ethics, I think that we should apply ethics to the databases. We should have databases ethics, because the problem was the databases that hold this information was not correct, right? So maybe we should regulate databases and talk about databases ethics. The second story that I would like to share, I would like to also thank Ben Thompson for the reference for the first story. A second story that I would like to share is Enron. We're all familiar with Enron scandal, right? A huge company collapsed because of accounting problems. They withheld 600 millions were missing. They overstated the revenues, 600 millions over 5 years. And those overstatements, they actually caused the collapse of the company eventually, and also the accounting firm that took over and was responsible for the bookkeeping, right? Arthur Anderson, the Big Five collapsed because of that, right? So the problem, essentially, when you think about it, that they had, accountants, they work with Excel spreadsheets. Excel spreadsheets are the best. So the problem, when you think about it in technological terms, was that the Excel spreadsheet had incorrect data. It overstated 600 millions of euros in one of the cells. So what I propose is to have Excel spreadsheet regulation or Excel spreadsheet ethics we have to talk about, right? So that's the second story. A third story is Zillow. We're coming to our age of AI. Zillow, you're familiar with, do you have any guests from the US? So Zillow, a company that actually produced quotes for houses, was a relatively popular tool. And actually they used their own AI tool to not only to provide house quotes to others based on different parameters. So they have this AI-based engine, which actually digested a lot of data, the neighborhoods, the cities, the previous purchases, the history of real estate, then the prices. And based on the crunching of those numbers, they had a model that knew how to predict the price for which the specific houses should be sold or bought. So they provided this as a service to the public, and they also used this model internally. They were also looking for deals, and they were buying homes. And this company went bankrupt. And actually, they accrued 1.5 billion in losses because the AI model during COVID, it was not predicting correctly the prices because everything changed, the reality changed. But the data set on which they trained the model did not change, right? They did not adopt the model to the new reality. So they continue predicting prices as if the reality is still static. And what happened is actually that the AI engine bought expensive homes and sold them for cheap prices. And this is how you accrue 1.5 billion in losses very quickly. And in that case, it was an AI-based engine used internally. So for this specific problem, what I suggest to do is to discuss regulation of AI, regulation of data set, or training data set ethics, right? It's also a discussion that we have to go to. So my point is, as you already realize, that in all of those cases, the technology itself was not a problem. It's not a problem that you should regulate or discuss ethics. Excel spreadsheet ethics is ridiculous. So I think that a lot of the discussion about AI regulation and a lot of the discussion about AI ethics is in 10 years from now, we will look back and we'll say, it's not the technology that was the problem. It's always about people in technology, always about people in AI and cybersecurity that we'll get to shortly as well. So we have a wrong level of abstraction. We don't have to think about ethics on the level of abstraction of technology. So when we think about people, we can think about different categories of people who are using this technology. So the vendors or the creators, the builders, if you will, of the technology. You can also think about the operators, the people who are operating the technology. And we're also talking about the users. So we have three major categories as I see it. And when you go to professions that are regulated or where you see a lot of ethics, like doctors, a lot of times it's not actually the vendors who we are talking about the ethics. Doctors, for example, is a good example, right? So if we analyze in those terms, so for example, if patients come in for an MRI scan or a CAT scan, then we have three different players. We have the vendor of the MRI machine, we have the doctor who is running the scan and analyzing, right? And we have the patient itself. And when we're thinking about the ethics of those three actors, we usually think about the doctor. We usually think about the user of the technology, right? The person who actually operates the technology, who tries to understand what's going on. The same with professional drivers, for example, right? We give drivers licenses if they want to drive a bus, because we don't want anyone to be able to drive a bus or a taxi, right? So again, if you think about those transactions, then you have the car vendor, car manufacturer, you have the professional driver, and you have the passenger. And again, nobody thinks about the ethics of the car manufacturer, usually. Usually you want to think about the drivers and what they can do, and all those stories we hear about Uber drivers recently. And investment professionals too, when you think about investments, so you have investment software and you have those professionals who are using the software and advising where to invest, and we have the users themselves that are actually receiving the advice. And again, the ethics or the problems of regulation usually do not apply to the vendors of the software. But suddenly, when we are talking about AI, people think that the vendors themselves should be regulated, which is a paradigm shift from what we usually used to, at least in most of the examples that I can think about. I'm sure that there are others that would be a bit different. And the question is, why do we have this discrepancy with AI? I see that you want to say something.
I have to.
Yeah. Do you want to say it now, or?
If
No, go ahead, please.
Okay, so
just on the cars issue, just as an example, that you said that, I don't know, 20 years ago, 40 years ago, we would have a session about cars. I think it's coming back again, because if you look at autonomous cars, there are big questions around that and how you utilize AI in that scenario. I mean, it's not my scope of work, but I've heard so many discussions about if the car drives by itself and you have a kid on the road and you have an old lady in the side of the road, where would you sway the car? And the decision is of the car, but people manufacture the car. You talked about the driver and the manufacturer. So these are big questions that are coming back. And now I will say my cliche. It's always the people, but the thing is that AI systems, or technology, it kind of takes the people off the scale of discussion, so to speak. Okay, because this is technology decided. Most people would say, it's not me, it's the machine. This is my cliche that I have to say. So I would say that even though the regulations are, I don't know, we don't know the impact of the AI Act and so forth. I think it's highly, highly important for us to develop that discussion, even though you find it maybe a little not updated. I think it is very much real. For us to understand how we try to make our systems less biased, or look at the mistakes that those machines could do to our lives. And even if we won't go a few steps back. This is a real issue and problem that I'm not sure that in 10 or 20 years would be forgotten so fast.
No, I'm not sure it's going to be forgotten either. But 2 comments on the autonomous cars. So the research you're referring to is from MIT Moral Machine Experiment. It was published in Science, I think. So they offered anyone to go to their website and to judge different situations. So one situation, you have a car that should go straight and kill a kid, or you can divert and kill someone else, 2 adults, and then people should have judged those situations, volunteers from all over the world, and they published the results. And one of the conclusions was that in every country, there are different opinions about what should happen. So ethics is actually very fluid among different cultures. So that's one comment. Another comment, and again, a lot of times the discussion of ethics goes to bias, at least in some of the things. Sorry, Cedric. And there's research also about autonomous cars. Apparently, they have a higher chance of killing people with a dark skin, especially at night. So they run over, statistically, more dark-skinned people than white people. So there's a problem there. It's a technological problem because it's night, it's dark, so the car sees less, right? So it's a bias, it's an ethical issue because you now have a technology that differentiates between who it kills. So one of the solutions could be, if you really want to solve this bias problem and behave ethically, maybe we should occasionally run over white people just to balance the statistics.
It's funny enough, but I think that what I'm trying to say, that even though it's hard, we cannot avoid going into it. Okay, that's
I agree.
cliche.
I just find those discussions. I think there is merit. There is a lot of merit to those discussions. I think that many things today are first premature because we're not yet able to fully grasp the technology. And others are going to be outdated very, very quickly. But there is still some merit to discussion of the things that are not that one and not that one. So that's my point. I just want to connect it to cybersecurity, and then we could continue the discussion, unless, of course, you want to.
If actually, when you were talking about that you want to have a good driver and that people want to have a good driver and they don't care about the manufacturer, I noted down, I want a licensed driver, but I also want the car to be safe. And that's the same with AI. I don't want a system that actually will decide wrongly or be easily played by other people. So just a quick note on that one.
I couldn't agree more, but it's a discussion of a price point. It's not a discussion of ethics. So I also, when I fly, I prefer flying business or first class if possible. But usually it's the ticket is much more expensive, so people usually choose to, me personally also, to fly coach. I would also rather to have the better product, but it's not an ethical question in my opinion.
But if we start with an ethical and compliant approach in the beginning, then we will have the cheaper price sooner than if we start with products that are cheap and nobody will actually at the end use them, because over time they will be afraid to use them because it would either discriminate them or do something other wrong to them. And then after a long time of trial and error, we find out that anyway the ethical approach is the best one, because then the people accept the technology.
I think that depends on the market. So what you're saying is true, then people would stop riding cheap cars who are also not safe. And this is not the case. People are still buying cheap cars which are not safe, because again, it's a price point consideration. One more, when you fly business, by the way, you're first to take off and you're first to land. So let's connect that to cybersecurity. So I think there are uniquenesses to cybersecurity discussion when we're talking about ethics. So first, we're all familiar, I hope so, we're all familiar with intersections between cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. There are three main intersections. The first one is how defenders are using AI, mainly vendors. And the second one is how the attackers are using AI, and we see more of that in the recent couple of years. And the third intersection is what we call adversarial AI, or how AI systems themselves can be compromised. So when we're talking about ethics of AI, I assume that the discussion does not apply on the second category of attackers, because they couldn't care less about regulations, they couldn't care less about ethics, so we are only left with the vendors and with adversarial AI, with the vendors of AI systems that we hope would make products more secure and better and more robust, etc. So let's discuss the vendors of AI. Vendors of security systems that are using AI. And a couple of examples, again, stories that make me question whether regulating the good guys is actually a good idea, because they're the only ones who are applicable to regulation or ethics. So, and ethics and regulations are usually something that makes my job harder, not easier as a defender, right? So a lot of times when GDPR came out, in Europe in the recent years, we saw a bunch of companies actually starting to ask their legal departments whether they are able to collect logs from computers in the enterprise to analyze whether they're under attack or not. So when you want to detect attacks, you need to have visibility into your environment. You need to collect a lot of logs for different machines, servers, computers, PCs, security appliances, and then you analyze those logs in a nutshell, and you try to figure out whether you've been attacked or not. And once GDPR kicked in, actually now you start to question yourself what logs you're actually able to collect from users. Because maybe it's a private information of the user. If the user logs in at 8 in the morning, am I infringing their privacy? So actually the scope of the logs that we were able to collect depends on the flexibility of the legal department. And I'm not sure that that's a good thing for security. Another example is... Yeah, please.
Just maybe regarding some of the points that you mentioned, I think, as you said, it's not a new issue, just a bigger issue now that we had in the past. People have questioned the media for many years. Some people still think that the moon landing didn't happen, and there was no deep fake or back in the days. So it's an issue, but a bigger one. And even with autonomous cars that you just talked about, it's about the same thing. We already have technology that's been set to help us drive better. An ABS system, an automatic braking system does the same. The system decides where to provide that service. I'm calling it like this on purpose, and someone planned it that way. So, and for me as a pro tech guy, I rather have a good technology that was tested based on millions of past incidents than having a 20-year-old driving for the last 2 years, or here in Israel coming back from the army service for the weekend and needing to decide whether he needs to save the kid or the elderly woman. So it might sound horrifying, or should we trust technology when we do that? But we already there. It's just another big leap. I don't know if it's a leap of faith that we need to do, and ethics definitely is required, but it's about having good technology and investing in it, and all of us working together, at the, which is not the case, I think, with the same goal in mind of having the best AI that can be implemented either in cars, face recognition, so on, while still keeping regulation in terms of privacy, in terms of copyrights, and other issues. So definitely an issue, but I think humanity can face it. I don't know, keeping a positive approach on that.
Okay, you just mentioned that ethics might be the problem, like the issue. I think it's the perspective that we look at the ethics. It can be like another layer of burden that we need to take into account, but also it can be a guideline, like an inspiration, like I am solving this issue and I really don't know what's correct or what's wrong. And I don't even know how to decide or search for the information. And somewhere in the world, there already is somebody who thought about that and can give you a perspective. And with ethics, it's not binding. You can decide if you take the perspective or not. And then it also gives you an opportunity to show what your values are. So then you can actually get a better alignment in communicating with the people that are working for you to create the system, with your customers, and with the world around. You will then get customers who have the same values as you do, and they will love your system and want to use it and will continue recommending it. And then you will also have employees who understand what you are really doing and why, and how you're implementing it, those values, like in practice. So I think ethics can be advantage, not the layer of burden.
Just to circle back and maybe sum it up, I would say there are two use cases basically that you've presented. One is about research, about making our AI models to be better and not being undermined by a situation where you can't train those and you release a product that is not good to the public. So I would say that for research purposes, maybe we should consider to be more lenient and try to find ways for the research and the training to be easier, but still under some guidelines and regulations. That's important. I don't think that in Israel there's much regulations around that. We should have more on that. From one hand to allow it, but from the other hand to try to constrain the risks. But the other use case is around like the use case that you've presented around profiling in working places, where I really agree with you that the ethics should be our beacon of light around that. Also around cybersecurity using data. So if there's no restrictions around that, then you can collect anything you want. So you might have a better way of coping with the attacker, which is we all want that. But you can also find yourself in a position where you collect things that you maybe not really need for your actions. And we know about that as well. So I don't see a way that there won't be any kind of guidelines to make sure that the private person would not feel that he is completely out of control on his personal data. I think it's still important. Maybe the feeling is that the ethical issue is much more, has more burden than it should be. But I wouldn't say you can get it out of the equation altogether. It's very important to find the balance and sweet spot. And that's, again, a cliche. Thank you so much.
It looks like we failed on that one. Okay, we can take some questions from the audience, please.
First of all, thank you for coming back to my example at the beginning, because we didn't really talk about that. I would say that you're right, first of all. We're living in an era, and it's going to be more and more intense, like Oleg said before, that it's a question can you believe anything that you see? And also, what is the story that you're telling yourself? And is it based on facts or anything that is imaginary? And the question is about social media. Would we get to a point where we see that the public would understand that everything there is so fake that it would draw back from it? And that would be maybe the best motivation for those companies to try to think again about what they allow or not allow, or maybe mark the things that are fake. So I'm not sure where we're going to get to that, and at what point, and will we get to that? But I'm afraid it would be maybe the most powerful motivation for those companies to rethink about their business model. So I don't have good news around that. Sorry.
Maybe just a short to that, because I think first of all, trust is a big issue. But if we feel that the situation today, even before AI, let's say a year ago, before ChatGPT, in social media reflected actual reality, that's not the case. Regardless of AI, it's not the case. And media in general has been biased in one way or the other, more or less, but at the end, it's us writing the story, it's us projecting our point of view about something. And that has always been the case. It's another leap, as I mentioned before, when it comes to AI. Yes, it will be harder to do, harder to distinguish, but it's something that if we ignored it until now, we need to address it now. And I don't think ethics is a burden that way, but something that you mentioned, how can I decide? I think at the end, that will be the main issue, how we make the decision based on all the information that we have. And in that case, we are just as the AI. We are good as the data that we get. And the more data that we get, we can make more the right decisions. By the way, the right decision for you might not be the right decision for me. So same with the AI, depending on the tool. And we are already AI or technology, which will always be more advanced than regulatory or regulation, is already in place. It decided on your email, it decided on your route to a certain place. It decides so much, just didn't call it AI. It was comfortable for us, and it was good for us. And if AI will do that the same, we will embrace it and use it, and then we need also to align it with our ethics. Same thing with any other technology, cars, medicine, computers in general, social media, and that will be the case forever. We need to understand the discussion that we have today. This panel, I think that was a great example. 20 years ago, 70 years ago, could have been the same. It's just a big leap that we haven't seen before, or maybe we have, but I wasn't there to experience it myself.
What we would like, we would like the panel. If you're welcome to make a panel comment. If you could please keep it short, because really we'd like to hear from the panel. But yes, feel free to make a comment, but keep it short. We have about 10 minutes left, so if you could keep it to 1 minute.
Thank you for your comments. So some of them I agree, some of them I don't. So let's start from the end.
Can I just answer about the definition? The idea was to challenge. And actually, there is no conflict between law and ethics, but we rather wanted to tackle those concepts that I talk about morality that is beyond the law, where the law doesn't cover. So that was the idea of definition, and thank you. I think we achieved the purpose.
So about the last comment, your last comment about ethics committees in companies. So I'm not sure in how many companies they have a true mandate to make a difference. And we saw already examples from the biggest companies where ethical decisions have a conflict with the business wins. And sometimes. Okay. Academy is theoretical. Yeah. Academy, I agree. But Academy produces papers and the vendors are producing the models that are actually using. And so when the business has a conflict with ethics in those companies, a lot of times we see that the people who are working in those ethical committees go home. So a lot of I have the feeling that a lot of those departments are like we had greenwash in the 90s and 2000s, now it's ethics wash. So we have a department which is responsible for ethics. But going back to the comment, I agree that there is a difference from other technologies in AI. By definition, every new technology is different from what was back then, right? So cars were very different from horses, and AI is very different from what we had so far. So just combine both of your comments. So I do think that AI is different in the sense that a lot of the technologies that we had so far, they were replacing the human muscles like machines with machine power, right? And what AI is trying to do is to replace our brain power with something else. And this frightens a lot of people. Another thing regarding AI that it changes, and this is a comment of Bruce Schneier, that it changes the speed, scale, and scope of the things that we did previously. So we did have a lot of fake news on the media, but it was taking time to craft those news, to spread those news, the scope of how many bots would spread them also. And now you can actually create millions of items instantaneously and then publish those everywhere you would like. So just one domain, but we have a similar domain in other, similar problem in other domains as well. Again, when you think about that, think about what Bruce Schneider proposes, think about scale, scope, scale and scope of the problem. And I tend to agree. And just a second, and when we're going back, if you really think that what I try to say so far is that vendors are typically not the ones who we think about typically when we think about ethics. But what your comment suggests is that we have to go to vendors, those who are building those models. And again, when you break down those to their parts, to the components, what is a vendor eventually? How do you build AI? Then you have this famous triad of what it takes to build AI models. So one of the things that you must have is talent, your engineers. The other that you must have is your computing power. And the third one is data, which is relatively new because we had software industry, we had, for decades, we had computing power and nobody even thought about trying to regulate or ethics of CPUs. It's not a thing. Software engineers, we have those debates, never-ending debates about how we should regulate them and what's the ethics and should they be liable for the products and should they write secure code and what happens if a cybersecurity problem appears. So we already have those debates. And now instead of talking about cybersecurity, responsibility, we're talking about AI, responsibility of engineers, software engineers, but it's the same discussion. But the new thing is data, and I think that's where the real problem lies. So when you think about different problems of bias, but not just bias, any other problem, it's usually rooted in data. So the examples that I gave you earlier with Enron and with the post office and others, usually when you think about it, the problem was with data. And this is the exact same problem that we are going to have now with AI. If you train your model on bad data, you're going to get bad results, right? Garbage in, garbage out. And
Thank you.
yeah, it's just 2 sentences and I'll finish. And The thing with data is that these days you train models on such quantities of data that you don't really have a technological solution of going over those data sets and trying to make sure that they are sanitized. They don't have any bias, they don't have any problems, they don't have any false data, they don't have any racist slurs like it happened in data set released by MIT, or images of women that labeled as with C word or as bitch. And these are the top data sets that we're using with thousands of citations. You just don't have the capacity of going over billions of items, of images or text samples, if you scrape the entire internet, and trying to map out all the weeds. So I think that the main problem is there.
I'll be very quick. So actually, when it comes to AI ethics, we do have 3 branches. One of them is ethics for design, which is to actually make software engineers aware of the problems that are inherent when it comes to data, when it comes to processing. Then we have ethics by design, which is creating codes of conduct. And the last one is, I think, ethics in design, which is whether AI should be making moral decisions or not. What you're saying, I think we have been mixing these approaches here, talking about AI deciding something.
We're just, we're getting nudges, gentle nudges, that we should wrap up the panel. And I think I don't know if you guys are available, but for any further questions and comments, I think it would be great afterward the panel for I think it makes sense. It seems like a topic that's a lot deeper and we just scraped the surface. I don't know if, I'm trying to see, maybe Rony, if you have any final comments that you'd like to make from what you've heard so far. And I think your perspective as a company here is very important and interesting.
As I mentioned before, tech will be more advanced than regulation, than any ethics committee and so on. We do have ethics embedded in what we do, and it's more important in the business because we understand that if we won't act in an ethical way, we won't have a business. But I think this is a unique use case for us dealing with data and what is ethical and what is not. Regarding your question, I think it's an important one in general. We have nothing to do with what we don't know that we don't know. It's a blind spot, okay? And we, yeah, I know. We're way past that, okay? I think AI can assume what will happen, okay? It lives in an optimum state, in hypothetical situations, and can decide among many situations and what would be the right thing to do. You may not agree with that because the previous panel talked about people more important than the data, because people will plan the algorithm and write the algorithm for that AI model. And as mentioned before, data is also the key differentiator between a good AI or bad AI or how good it can be. So probably, as it has been in the past, technology, people will invent new technology and advance AI and will test to see, and I think testing, we haven't touched about testing, and to see how good it is or how ethical it is or how responsible it is before it gets out to the public. And this is something that can be regulated, and I think a lot of the regulation really talks about it, what kind of tests need to be done before you release a new AI model, and also transparency about how it was trained, what are the subjectives that any AI model is doing. So it's important to give companies the freedom to go ahead and continue inventing and develop new technologies. Regulators trying to catch up to speed with that. It's a challenge, but I think as we heard here, it's something that won't be solved here in this panel. But definitely encourage all of you to continue this discussion and among ourselves, and I'll be happy to do so with anyone. I think the opinions that we got here are fascinating, and we just, as you mentioned, we just scratched the surface.
Okay, so we would like to conclude, and I think we have to admit that we failed on the cliché part. However, I hope we managed to challenge you a little bit and maybe leave you with some food for thought. And I would like to thank our wonderful panelists for this very interesting and innovative discussion. And thank you, Cedric. And thank you everyone for coming and joining us today.